In the case of Frans Lanting, it's almost too easy to fill an introduction with superlatives like a master of nature photography, widely published and respected, gifted and remarkable, liked by all of his friends. You've heard them, you've read them, they're all true, but honestly, they fall short to me. Because with all due respect to Frans, they don't go far enough to describe him or his work. Now, there's a quote you may have seen from Tom Kennedy. He was our director of photography at National Geographic some time ago. Frans Lanting is a singular, extraordinary talent. He has the mind of a scientist, the heart of a hunter, and the eyes of a poet. I like that. That's pretty damn good. I wish I'd come up with it, actually. But, I can't leave it there, as you well know. Because Frans Lanting is old soul, old school, the last of a breed. He is self-taught, raised on film, making the photographs that are hard to make and earning every one of them. With his unending curiosity, fierce determination, and incredible hard work, he is connected to the natural world in a way that few have ever been. His photographs can be familiar, and at times they appear to be of another world entirely, making you question whether we're even sharing the same planet. Close encounters of the Frans kind. Finding inspiration with everything and every place, from the deserts of Botswana to the jungles of Borneo, the exotic and primordial shores of New Zealand and New Jersey. Working in an air as rarefied as the endangered species he documents, wild creatures become ambassadors for a challenged planet. And Frans Lanting is their spokesperson. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you, Vince, for that introduction. You should do more of the talking, and then we'll just roll the images. Good to see you all here tonight. It's wonderful to be here in Charlottesville, see so many friends, but also to run into new people. And I'm curious, how many of you have heard me talk before? So a lot of people who have not heard me talk before about these images. What I'm going to do tonight is tell you some of the stories behind them. And I'm calling this talk Dialogues with Nature, because that's what my life has been about. I ask questions about nature, and I try to come up with some answers through my camera, and then pass on the answers along with new questions to all of you. Dialogues. Dialogues with Nature. It began here. I'm from the Netherlands, which is a very flat country. There's not a lot to see. And in this case, my goal was not to show too much either. Just a feeling of solitude. And then I moved to the United States in the late 70s. And ever since, I've had a split personality. Part European, part American. I've lived on the coast of California since the late 70s, and it's been my launch pad for exploring the rest of the planet. And it's influenced me deeply how I look at the world. It's influenced my dialogue with nature. It was a jump-off point for going off to places like the Galapagos, a world lost in time, chronicling the beginnings of time at the edge of erupting volcanoes in Hawaii. The grandeur of the tropics, last rainforest in Borneo. And while I stood there, aiming my camera in that direction, we could hear the bulldozers behind us. Beauty is only skin deep when it comes to the natural world, in my opinion. To me, the essence of nature is vitality. It's a process of never-ending change. That's what this image aims to capture. Change, forever changing. Ice getting eroded by the force of waves impacting on an iceberg near the Antarctic. And I like to add layers of a surrealness to my images at times. Compressing perspectives, leads to discomposition. My background's in social sciences, and I've never seen the separation between working with nature and getting involved with culture. I've done a lot of collaborative projects with other artists, in this case a prominent Aboriginal artist named Turkey Tolson Chaparula. We worked together, aiming our vision at the same piece of rock. He created a painting, and I turned that into an image. And I've collaborated with other photographers generations apart. I've been in the footsteps of Frank Hurley, who chronicled Shackleton's expedition. And at the end of the year, I'm going back to Antarctica with the same camera that Hurley used to continue that exploration. That previous image, I should say, was made in the exact same spot where Hurley stood when he captured Shackleton taken off. My dialogue with nature started when I was still living in the Netherlands. And this is where I lived for years, in a gritty working class district in the port city of Rotterdam. And I studied economics at the Erasmus University. I turned that into environmental economics to try and reconcile the clash between economic redevelopment in the Netherlands that I saw and the impact it had on the natural world. But whenever the classes ended, I would sneak outside and focus a camera on natural patterns nearby. I was quite influenced by Eastern art and Eastern philosophy at the time, and that led to simple images like this, sparrow in a willow tree. And I was very influenced by the Japanese art of creating haiku, very short poems that captured one simple experience, seen or heard or felt in nature, how red they are. And that inspired me to create images like this. For 2 years, I worked in a city park in Rotterdam to chronicle the passing seasons, and I combined them with haiku, classical haiku, like this one, led to an image like this. And that turned into my first exhibition, a multimedia project, if you will, poetry and images, fueled by the same curiosity. Then I escaped to wider spaces beyond the city limits of Rotterdam. I began to explore the coastal landscapes of the Netherlands. But I also saw industry march in. There was a relentless change in the Dutch landscape in the 1960s and 1970s, and it overwhelmed the landscapes that I grew up with. So I went farther north, to the Wadden Sea, the only place in the Netherlands where there's a true open horizon. And then I arrived in the West Coast to do research in my chosen field of environmental economics. My goal was to study methodologies of how we can quantify the value of nature and to make it part of public decision making. But I was overwhelmed by the grandeur of the natural scenes along the West Coast. Nature exists on a scale that is unbelievable when you come from the Netherlands. Just like these European painters first chronicled the West Coast, painters like Albert Bierstadt and Moran, who created the first visions of these fabulous places. Now look at the color of that water there on the right-hand side of that painting. Bierstadt didn't make that up. That wave is still there. It curls over every day. It's 20 minutes from where I live. It's Mavericks. The grandeur of the redwoods, they're still there. These are the young ones, regenerating themselves after The old ones have been pretty well cut down. My first experience with photography of the natural world in the United States came through this book, Not Men Apart. How many of you remember that book? Interesting. Published in 1970, it was a first attempt to bring together some of the finest photographs of nature and to turn them into a testimonial for the purposes of advocacy. And when you look at the title page, you see Ansel Adams is there, Elliot Porter is there, Edward Weston is there, Philip Hyde, Win Bullock, and so on. All the early masters were there. And brought together by a man named David Brower, who led the Sierra Club at the time. True visionary, true radical. And his close buddy was Ansel Adams. And they were the dream team when it came to publishing photographs of nature and putting them in the service of bigger goals, political goals. If you're not familiar with those books, I really recommend that you try and put your hands on some of them. You can still find them used. Brower published 20, 30 of them about all the great places and moved the needle in significant ways. And that inspired me to abandon economics and to pick up a camera. I had no idea what I was getting into. As Vince explained, I'm self-taught. I'm a failed economist. I have no background in natural history, self-taught as a photographer. I can truly claim I made all the mistakes myself. But I did learn how to understand the behavior of animals by hanging out with biologists and then getting into close encounters. And my job became to make them look good, which is a little challenging in the case of elephants, yes? My interest in animals and seeking them out goes back farther into my youth. When I was 8 years old, my parents gave me a book that was an adventure story about a young boy in Sweden who ends up getting very small so he can travel with a flock of wild geese, and he learns to see the world through their eyes. And that was a revelation to me. And ever since, I've tried to see the world through the eyes of other creatures. Of course, I could have never dreamt that one day I would be able to do images like these. Sitting in a tower 80 feet above the forest floor in Peru, to see young macaws fly back and forth from their perspective. I've got something with birds. They really speak to me. No matter whether they're dead, killed by a car somewhere in Northern California, a dead barn owl, or the extraordinary cacophony and visual stunning beauty of flocks of snow geese descending in front of Mount Shasta. My dialogue with nature evolved after I came to the United States. It started rather self-centered, rather romantically, when I was interacting with that city park, being influenced by those haikus. I was stunned by the West Coast, and I started to absorb the grandeur of the landscapes. Then I started publishing for magazines, European magazines like Geo. I started doing things for Life, and then in the mid-'80s, I knocked on the doors at National Geographic magazine, and I was actually given an opportunity to try something. Mr. Gilka sent me to Madagascar, and that is when my dialogue with nature took on a new dimension. Because as a photojournalist on assignment in a place like Madagascar, you have a new responsibility. This is a world that had not been seen, had not been photographed in decades. So you have to become transparent. You have to put your own feelings in the background And often it's more important to chronicle what is there. Landscapes that had never been seen before from the air, like the Chingi de Bemaraha. Even the Minister of Tourism in Madagascar professed not to know about it. Weird places like the spiny forest down south. Extraordinary plants like these aloes. Amazing creatures. Chameleons big enough to catch birds using that amazing tongue. Making these unseen seen. Bizarre nocturnal lemurs like aye-ayes. People are very afraid of them. Just mentioning their names in villages up and down the East Coast makes people turn away from you. And the poster boys. Much friendlier looking than those aye-ayes. They became a cover for the Geographic. Two sea fox sitting it out in the middle of the day. But my job was not just to show the beauty and the extraordinary nature of the island, but also to reveal the tension that exists between nature and culture. That is what I was trying to do here. Man looking up at a lemur and the lemur looking down. The collective result of the clash between nature and humanity in Madagascar is the tragedy of the commons. Everybody tries to take a piece, and the end result is a ravaged landscape. People have only been in Madagascar for 1,000 years, and there's virtually no forest left. But it's a tragedy without villains, because many of these people have no choice. They've got nothing, no place to go. So what they do is cut down a few more trees, grow rice for a few years, and then they have to move on because the soil becomes unproductive. And the fact that some of these places have been declared protected, that news never gets to some of these folks because they can't read or write. So can you blame them? We, of course, are in a different position. Through all the knowledge, all the information that is available to us, and through all the amazing stories published in magazines like the Geographic. This corner office on the 8th floor at the Geographic's headquarters in DC was an epicenter for the exchange of information and stories. Behind the desk is Mary Smith. And that chair in front of her desk is the same chair where Jacques Cousteau sat, Louis Leakey, Jane Goodall, when she was a girl with a ponytail, nobody knew, Diane Fossey, and every photographer of natural history over a period of 25 years who also wanted to tell a story. So Mary was one of my mentors and of many of my colleagues. My style evolved to make images more dramatic so that I could make people come into a world that I thought was interesting and worth contemplating. And often you only get a few seconds to impress somebody when they open up a magazine or a book. So you have to layer your images. There's the surface, and then there's all the layers underneath. A man holding an egg that is unbelievably big, belongs to a bird that's been extinct for centuries, and then that fantastic landscape. You put them all together and you have a whole story in one image.